Thank you, Bryce. Welcome, everybody, to this wonderful Sunday morning here at Salt and Light Christian Church. The story that I will be telling you all this morning is about the early church father, Athanasius of Alexandria. Athanasius was most famously known for his quote that goes, "If the world stands against the truth, then I will stand against the world." A powerful statement, not just back then, but even today. Athanasius was born at the very end of the 3rd century and lived during the 4th century. And we don't know much about his childhood. We know he was most likely born to pagans in the city of Alexandria. He was an Egyptian, Alexandria being in Egypt. However, somewhere during his youth, sometime, he ended up coming to Christ, because we know as an older teenager, he was already being discipled by the bishop of Alexandria, a man named Alexander. And at this time, during the early church, there were many heresies that were running rampant and confusing people and just causing unnecessary chaos and destruction in the church. And one of the most prevalent of these heresies at the time was Arianism. I've talked about Arianism before, but a brief summary of it. Essentially, Arianism claimed that Jesus himself was a created being, and therefore Christianity at best would be polytheistic, worshiping multiple gods, and at worst, worshiping the creature rather than the creator. However, we know that that is false because it is a heresy. But due to this rampant spread of these heresies, several church fathers, including Alexander of Alexandria, agreed to hold a council to combat these heresies and to establish the truth and the theology that would dictate and direct the Christian church going forward. And so they held the Council of Nicaea, a very famous or perhaps infamous council, depending on who you are talking to. And the main goal of this council, despite several things happening here, was to combat Arianism. And so Alexander, along with several other church fathers, did so and explained the heresy of Arianism and countered it by establishing what we now call the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith that the church still holds to this day. However, shortly after this council, Alexander ended up dying. And so Athanasius stood up and took his position as bishop in Alexandria. And for pretty much the rest of his life, Athanasius defended the Christian faith against the heresy of Arianism. Several times throughout his life, and as he held the position of bishop in the city of Alexandria, the Arianism would spread and gain a foothold in the city, and they would end up casting him out of the city, essentially, making him flee for his life, and he would go and live in the outskirts or in the desert for a time until the Christians once again pushed the heresy back out of the church and welcomed him back to the position of bishop. This happened multiple times throughout Athanasius's life. However, despite this constant struggle that he had against this heresy, he kept the faith strong. And he never backed down from it. Even when he had to flee his position, he never capitulated. And we can see this throughout his life, the story of a godly man who is known now in the annals of history as a man who spent his life dedicated to defending the deity of Christ. And thanks to him, as well as other early church fathers like him, the church has continued to move forward throughout history and stay true to Christ and our biblical theology. So thank you. Let's bring the music up.